Good evening, morning, wherever you are in the world. This is UNLV Arts Worldwide. I'm Nancy Uscher, Dean of the College of Fine Arts at UNLV. Today, we have an episode about taking risks. You really can't be an artist without taking risks. And risks lead to learning, figuring out what works and what doesn't. In this very series, when I was interviewed about what would it be, I said, well, we're going to be taking risks. We've never done this before. We're going to be trying things out, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. And I noticed that when people wrote about our very own series of UNLV Arts Worldwide, one of the phrases that I used when we were discussing the future and what the series would be was people said, this series is going to be about risk-taking. So we thought, let's have an episode about risk. It seemed to make sense. We know that when people make their art, sometimes they need to travel when it's safe to travel. And one of the segments of the episode today will be about a faculty member who needed to travel to Nepal to be a theater maker and had a very interesting experience. And we're looking forward to that segment, among others. And he didn't know what he would find, and he will, I'm sure, discuss that some of the conditions were something that he had to learn to deal with, and that is also part of our art making experience, and it's what we teach our students as well. We're also going to be talking, among other segments, about the hospitality industry, which has had to pivot. It's had to do different work in our very own university. One of the stellar hospitality programs in the world has had to teach its students about this time. And finally, in this time of the pandemic, our students making art have had to change some of their perspectives, and they have, of course, responded to this time, sometimes taking risks in their art making. Thank you for being with us. This is UNLV Arts Worldwide, reaching from Las Vegas to the world. Enjoy.
Everyone, this is UNLV Arts Worldwide. I'm excited to be here today with Norma Saldivar, who's the chair of our theater department. And Norma is going to tell us about a really exciting project that she initiated last year. Norma.
Yeah, thank you for having me and including the project. We were all sort of comrades in arms in this project, so I'm really glad to share it. This was a project that came to us through one of my own students who is an undergraduate. Her name is Lourdes, and Lourdes Cuadrado was a student, an undergraduate student, very interested in stage management and producing. But she was this terrific gal who came from Puerto Rico, had a degree in biology, followed her husband here. His name is Alan Medina, and he works at Cirque specifically with Michael Jackson production. And so they had come up with a great idea to bring artists from Cirque to be mentors, to be exploratory artists with our own students. And so they came to me and came up with this great proposal, this wonderful PowerPoint proposal about how they could create art with our students. And so I set upon, looking at the proposal and really getting a sense of what they wanted to do, and immediately knew that it had to be something that was interdisciplinary and that would include everyone from dancers to visual artists to people who were performance artists to actors to directors to designers to stage managers, and we set upon bringing people together and had this amazing experience. The premise of it was very simple. 3 artists would come over, and their names, I'm going to read them off because they were amazing. Alison Burke, Marcus Weiss, and Kent Caldwell, all who had performed in different shows with Cirque. They came in, and over a 48-hour period, they created this astounding evening of performance with our students.
Yeah, and Norma, the 48-hour period was the big risk for this too, that they just came in together and within a weekend made it go.
Yeah, absolutely. There was we knew what the premise was. We're coming in, we're going to put together 30 students and these 3 amazing artists, and out of 48 hours later, we were going to have something. We didn't know what it was. So you can imagine that sort of pitching that idea to our faculty and our graduate students to say, here's this great idea, this great opportunity to work with circ artists. We don't know what it's going to look like at the back end of it. We don't know how much energy we're going to have to put into it as we make it, but it's going to be fun, and it's going to be entertaining, and it's going to be really thoughtful and provocative, and I think it was.
And I thought it was amazing because actors and dancers and visual artists mixed together. Sometimes you didn't know who was a dancer, who was an actor, and they moved outside of their typical discipline. So that was amazing.
Yes, and also I think for students, because when we auditioned them, as you say, we had all different types of students. We had theater study students, we had theory students, we had production people, and they decided they wanted in on the project. But part of what they also had to understand, and what was risky for them, I think, was they had no idea who their mentor would be, or who their artist mentor would be. They had no idea what the performance really would entail, what the thrust or the focus of the performance was. So, and that to me seems really, really exciting, but it could be very scary for students, right, to commit themselves to it.
And it's amazing to look at it in this episode, which is about risk-taking. So Norma, I want to thank you for bringing this project to us last year and for bringing the students together and the departments together.
My name is Emily Budd. I teach sculpture and 3D foundations at UNLV. Halfway through the semester, everything, was totally changed at the last minute. I didn't want to even pretend that we could continue with the classes as they were. So I was really thinking about using this as an opportunity to get the students to think about how artists respond to current events, circumstances in our lives, different experiences that different people go through in various crises, and how art can be used to interpret that. So in Sculpture 1, I was using Fluxus-inspired assignments to get the students to think about more about the process and the product. I feel like in these times and in these circumstances, especially with sculpture, that this was a great opportunity to think about process and experimentation over the final product. So I saw a lot of students really pushing themselves with rethinking their everyday materials, their everyday items in their space around them. In foundations, I had the students do an assignment based on Tom Sachs knolling, so they could all gather their materials. We were told last minute that we no longer had the studio, so a lot of students didn't have any materials or tools, and I didn't feel like it was right to make them buy more things. So I really wanted to push them to experiment with what they had, whether it be plants from the backyard or childhood memories and photos or an old magazine, and to really push how you can create a new 3D form out of existing items. And then in foundations, I also did an entire section on recycled materials. I thought this would be a great opportunity to look at those as a resource for artists. When you think about plastics and foil and metal, these are all materials that are recycled for a reason. They're really valuable. And plastics come in great colors and you can cut it really easy. So we did dioramas as well as a survival gear project with recycled materials. And I thought some of the outcomes were great. Luckily, we had already had a lot of experience in cardboard. So I was really able to use the fact that there's so much cardboard in our lives right now, getting shipments of things and just generally, anything that comes in cardboard can be used now for art. And a lot of students still had a good base of supplies in 2D, for example, paint and that kind of thing. So I really encouraged them to paint the things they were building to really transform those materials. Yeah, the survival gear project was a way of getting them to think about issues surrounding these times and what kind of uncertainties they may bring up for the future. And the way that students interpreted that were all over the place. Some students were really just sick of talking about coronavirus. And I was really impressed to see that even though the students were limited with their materials, they could still really pull out their unique story and their point of view and apply it to these assignments. In the diorama project, I asked them to make a quarantine theme, whether it was something that relays what we're experiencing right now, or if it's a total escape from that. So some of the students, interpreted that in either way. Some were a little more dark, some were very uplifting, all over the board. So those were really interesting to see. We also did a time-based object that was Fluxus inspired. So again, thinking about the process more than the end result. And I had them actually like compile videos or stop motion or timeline, however they wanted to show an object in time. So they had to take apart an item and rebuild it and then document the process and then submit that as a final combined element. One of the best things this semester, a student named Brianna Hansen did a before and after of a broken lawn chair in her backyard and converted it into an amazing sculpture garden, or sculptural greenhouse, I should say. It's amazing, and I think probably a portfolio piece for her.
I'm Louis Kavouras. This is UNLV Arts Worldwide, and we are here today with two of our great deans from the university. This is Dean Stowe Shoemaker from our College of Hospitality and our Dean Nancy Uscher from the College of Fine Arts. Welcome, both of you.
It's great to be here.
Stowe, we're so pleased you're here with us today. You do fantastic work at the university, and we're just thrilled to have this conversation. This has been a really unprecedented and amazing time for all of us. What has it been like for you in your college and in general in the hospitality industry? What are the major, yeah.
Well, that's a great question. And I hate to use the word unprecedented because it's probably, one of the most overused words today beside Petri dish. But it's really unprecedented for our industry and for our college. I think, I think what this has shown the world is how important hospitality is and what a critical segment hospitality is to employment in the United States and really around the world. Obviously in Las Vegas, 36% we have 36% unemployment. And most of that is because of the hospitality industry. And I think as we looked at it from our perspective as a hospitality school, it really forced us to really make sure that when we think about hospitality, it's not just hotels and restaurants, but what are the other areas of academia and education that our students and hospitality that our students can take with them when they graduate, right? Because there's not a lot of jobs right now in hospitality, but kids are graduating with a hospitality degree. So we've really worked very hard with partners, both within the hospitality industry, but also areas you don't often think about, like healthcare, which has a service component. You think of, the grocery stores, right, which all now are starting to do home cooked meals, right? So all these become opportunities for our students. So it's really given us a time to really reflect to make sure our academic education is preparing our students for the future. It's kind of a long answer, but I hope it gets to the point.
So, it's such a beautiful answer because it shows how interconnected the world is.
Yes.
That we're all in it together and we all rely upon each other. I thought that was really illuminating, and I appreciate you sharing that with all of us in our audience. And I know that applied research is very important in your college, as is application.
Right.
Students getting jobs and wonderful hotels and other aspects of the industry. But what kind of new applied research do you think might come out of this time where we've been seeing, all of us have been seeing the world quite differently, sheltering in place, having to rely on our own resources in some ways rather than being out in the world? What do you think about that?
But it's really another great question. And you're going to see a couple things are going to happen. One is you're going to see a lot of innovation. right? So the question becomes is how do we provide great customer experiences while maintaining social distancing, right? And all the people who have had these great ideas who are thinking, gee, maybe I should try to do X to create a great experience. Now we're going to be teaching class in innovation. You know, we've been teaching classes in innovation, but now there's kind of a demand because industry is going to come to the university and say, what are you doing that can help us take care of the guests and provide a great experience?
What you're describing is very inspiring. I think your students, you as a scholar and a leader, and your faculty and your students have a tremendous contribution to make, and they're making it already. But I want to say it's a thrill, really, to hear about these plans for the future. And again, it really shows how interconnected we all are. But it's been so wonderful to hear your perspectives. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, of course, I think this is a certain time with everything that's happening in the world beside, you know, the virus is really the virus of racism. And how do we as educators really help students remove the unconscious biases that they may have? And how do we realize that we really are all connected world? And going back to this interdisciplinary, I think academia is changing. You know, it used to be everybody was kind of in their silos and they published their own journals and they did their own thing. And what we're realizing is that there's multiple ways to solve problems. And we have one idea in hospitality, you have another idea in fine arts, there's engineering. And by all of us coming together, we each bring our own strengths and we create this incredible service for society. And that's what I think is exciting.
I know that we're going to ask you to come back again. We can't wait. And Rama, our other wonderful dean here, Rama Venkat, to talk about, in a subsequent episode, to talk about our really exciting plans for an experience design master's degree at the university. I want to thank you very much and find out if Louis would like to say a few words. And
I have one question. Since we always find that there's a simpatico in Las Vegas with hospitality and fine arts because both of us are so interested in experiences, bringing people together.
Exactly.
What do you think is the next big thing for Las Vegas?
Well, I think the next big thing in Las Vegas initially is providing a safe environment for the guests in a way that creates the overall excitement of being in Las Vegas, while at the same time providing safety and security. And I think, you know, one of the big things that's happening in Las Vegas, of course, is this advent of sports, right? We've really become a major league sports town, you know, between now with NHL football, or NFL football and NHL hockey. And of course, we have the women's basketball team, the WNBA. And so I think for Vegas as a destination, it's going to become very much more of a sort of a sports town. But on the art side, we have the galleries at Bellagio opening. We have the beautiful art that we just see, here at UNLV. And so I think as people try to social distance, they may not spend as much time going to the clubs, but they're going to spend more time exploring these beautiful facilities that I know the Fine Arts Department has been very involved in helping design. And so I think you'll see a regeneration of the city, focusing on the beauty of the city, the beauty of the art within the city, and a sense that people I can have a great experience without having to be jam-packed next to people next to me screaming. That's kind of my view.
It's a wonderful view. Well, I want to thank both of you and thank you for your leadership at UNLV. It's great to have great leaders who have great vision for our university, our city, and these practices. So thank you so much for both being here today. This is UNLV Arts Worldwide.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
as a creative, as someone who goes to work every day trying to, do their best, the one thing that you have to keep in mind is that enthusiasm, that's common, especially at this, beginning and you're excited, but endurance is rare. So you've got to, set your sight on that goal, and whether or not you feel like you're making it, keep at that goal. Just keep at it. That is what people who have success do. And what does that mean when it pertains to risk? You have your sights set on that goal. You will risk going outside of your comfort zone in order to reach that goal. It was just kind of hearsay. But Warren Buffett, self-made billionaire, supposedly gets into his airplane and looks at his pilot, because billionaires have pilots that fly them around, things like that nature. And he looks at the pilot and goes, "Do you really want to be my pilot for the rest of your life? I mean, don't you have aspirations and goals?" And the pilot's like, "Well, I do, but I'm not a billionaire, so I can't." And so supposedly Warren Buffett looked at him and said, "Look, there's 3 things you can do to reach your goals. Number 1, write down 25 of the most important career goals in your life. Write them all down. Step number 2, do a little bit of soul searching and circle the top 5. It's kind of hard to do because all 25 are important. Circle the top 5. Step number 3, those 20 that you did not circle, forget about them. Do not waste time on them. Do not waste money on them. Do not borrow money to work on. All of those 20 are distractions keeping you from the 5 most important goals, keeping you from being able to make a decision to risk money, to risk time, to risk your coming out of your comfort zone in order to reach your goals."
Every day, more than 50 girls and young women are kidnapped and trafficked out of Nepal to enter a life of slavery. And recent disasters, including earthquakes, floods, civil wars, have decimated the country, increasing opportunities for criminal gangs to exploit women and girls. According to the India Times, in March of 2018, Nepali girls trafficked into India up 500% in the last 5 years. My friend and colleague Greg Mitchell, who's an assistant professor at UC Santa Barbara, introduced me to Alize and invited me to collaborate on the development of a new work using the dance and spoken word to tell the stories of these victims. Choreographer Alize Bionic, founder of Solus Performing Arts Institute in Kathmandu, has been collecting narratives and oral histories from these victims exploited in the sex trafficking crisis for more than 2 years. My role was to transform Nepal's largest theater venue into a landscape for an impactful and emotionally resonant performance. Through my work with a creative team over the next year, focusing on the narratives from those affected, the visual language of the piece would serve as an extension of their storytelling. The intended audience for this project was varied. The extent of human trafficking is not readily understood by many Nepalis, even in the capital city of Kathmandu. So we hope to share these deeply personal stories to reach people who may not even comprehend the magnitude of the problem. We also hope to inspire institutions in Nepal, its government and NGOs, as non-government organizations, to direct more resources to fighting human trafficking, as well as to increase services for the victims. So I traveled to Nepal on a fact-finding mission in spring break of last year before I started designing. And renowned costume designer Olga Maslova, who is currently an assistant professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana, was commissioned to create the costumes for the piece. So here are some of her early inspiration images. We began to collaborate the visual look of the project. Some themes began to emerge. We began to explore this idea that The victims were one with their environment. The girls belonged to their village, belonged in their villages. So we started to research material to emphasize and underline this central theme. What if we used the same materials for the set as well as the costumes? How could we impart the idea that the girls and young women were literally torn from their homes? What fabric or paper could be ripped? During my fact-finding mission, I discovered fabrics such as silk or muslin were imported into Nepal from China and India. They weren't locally manufactured. So outside of felt, Nepal doesn't really manufacture textiles. But this led me to the discovery of a locally produced paper product made from local reeds and grasses on small frames. This product came in various thicknesses and tonal variations and had this magical translucency when we lit it from behind, but more on that later. But I also began to look at the physical environment, the terrain of the villages in and around Nepal. What would their physical journey have been like when kidnapped? Can I draw parallels to their emotional journey? So based on these conversations and collaborations with my creative team, I created an initial rendering, followed up by a rough ground plan. Various heights were established to acknowledge the landscape of the terrain, but also to emphasize power and dominance. So, building a set in Kathmandu isn't just as simple as going to Home Depot and picking up some plywood. And it was important to the whole team that we use locally sourced or renewable resources and employ local artisans to create the world of the show. And during the period of set construction, the project grew in scale and scope. It was determined that the State Theater would no longer be acceptable as a performance venue for a number of reasons, not the least of which was they had no reliable electricity. That theater was in an area of the city still under major reconstruction from the earthquake. So we had to find a new theater, and we needed to move fast with the redesign using the elements already under construction into a new theater, and in this case was the Russian Cultural Center. So here's some process pictures of us gluing the Nepali paper into large panels. Here we are loading in the set into the Russian Cultural Center. This was the most terrifying scaffolding on the planet. And here we are into some production photos. You can see that even the Nepali paper, when sort of glued in these shapes, created this idea of cliffs, but also this idea of entrapment, of being dripped in. Ultimately, the flight was positively received by invited embassies, the diplomatic corps in Kathmandu, and that included the Russian Cultural Center, the Embassy of India, and the French Embassy, as well as Nepali officials. The United Nations Human Rights Council invited the flight to participate in the Ranga Shankara Theater Festival in Bangalore, India. But then, of course, COVID-19 had another idea. But negotiations are still underway to present this at that theater festival. It's difficult to measure the impact one singular theater piece may have on a systemic worldwide human rights crisis. Child trafficking from Nepal has long existed, exacerbated by poverty, civil unrest, natural disorders, and population displacement. But this too can be seen as Nepal's Me Too movement, affecting 1 out of 4 Nepalis, and the conversation, long hushed, is now out in the open and being discussed widely. So one can view this, hopefully, as a new beginning.
Going back! Going back! Going back!
I'll show you one more, movement 9, exploitation. So I do want to thank our chair, Norma Saldivar, and Dean Uscher for providing me with a small faculty development grant, which allowed me greater participation in the project than I could have just on my own. But I also want to express my gratitude to the colleagues in the theater department for picking up some slack as I undertook this endeavor. So I just want to thank you all.